The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Clarence's house as Camilla, queen consort, sat in her private study reviewing the day's schedule. Her secretary, Margaret, knocked gently before entering with a concerned expression that immediately caught Camilla's attention. "Your Majesty, there's been a development regarding the upcoming exhibition at Buckingham Palace," Margaret said, her voice carrying an unusual tension. "The Royal Collection Trust has made a request that requires your immediate attention." Camilla set down her reading glasses and looked up. After years of navigating the complexities of royal life, she had learned to recognize when something significant was brewing. The exhibition Margaret referred to was meant to celebrate the late Queen Elizabeth's reign, featuring personal items and treasures from her 70-year monarchy. "What kind of request?" Camilla asked, though something in her stomach already told her this would not be a simple matter. Margaret hesitated for a moment before continuing. "They want to display Queen Elizabeth's wedding dress as the centerpiece of the exhibition. However, there's been some discussion about whether it should be accompanied by other royal wedding dresses, including yours from 2005. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Camilla felt her chest tighten slightly. Her wedding to Charles had been a civil ceremony, followed by a blessing at St. George's Chapel. It had been a smaller, more intimate affair compared to the grand spectacle of Charles's first wedding to Diana. Even now, nearly 20 years later, comparisons between the two events still surfaced at the most unexpected moments. "I see," Camilla replied, keeping her voice steady. "And what exactly is the concern?" Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Some members of the Royal Collection Trust believe that displaying multiple wedding dresses might create unnecessary comparisons. They're particularly worried about public reaction, given the sensitive nature of the topic. Camilla stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where she had spent countless hours finding peace during difficult times. She understood the unspoken message. Despite her years of dedicated service, despite the public's growing acceptance of her role, there were still those who viewed her as an outsider who had disrupted the fairy tale narrative that many people cherished about the royal family. The late Queen Elizabeth's wedding dress was more than just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of hope and new beginnings after the dark years of World War II. The dress, with its intricate embroidery and 15-foot train, represented a nation's dreams for the future. Norman Hartnell had designed it with such care, incorporating symbols of rebirth and growth that spoke to a country eager to heal. Camilla remembered the first time she had seen the dress in person, shortly after her marriage to Charles. The Queen had shown it to her privately, sharing stories about the rationing coupons needed to purchase the silk, and how women from across the Commonwealth had sent silkworms to contribute to the fabric. It had been a moment of unexpected intimacy, a gesture that Camilla had treasured as a sign of acceptance from the woman who would become not just her mother-in-law, but her sovereign. "Has Charles been informed of this discussion?" Camilla asked, still facing the window. "Not yet, Your Majesty. The Trust wanted to speak with you first, given that the decision primarily affects the presentation of your own dress." Camilla turned back to face Margaret. She could see the discomfort in her secretary's eyes, and she felt a familiar protective instinct rise within her. Margaret had been with her through many challenging situations, and Camilla knew that delivering this message had not been easy for her. "Tell me, Margaret, what is your honest opinion about this situation?" Camilla asked, settling back into her chair. Margaret looked surprised by the direct question. In all her years of service, she had learned to present facts and options without offering personal judgments. But something in Camilla's tone invited honesty. "I think, Your Majesty, that your dress deserves to be displayed with pride. Your wedding day was a celebration of love and commitment, and the dress you wore was beautiful and meaningful. The public has moved forward, and perhaps it's time for some within the institution to do the same." Camilla smiled at Margaret's courage. It was exactly the kind of straightforward response she had hoped for, and it reminded her why she valued Margaret's counsel so highly. "You're quite right," Camilla said. "Schedule a meeting with the Royal Collection Trust for this afternoon. I think it's time we had a proper conversation about this exhibition." As Margaret left to make the arrangements, Camilla remained in her study, thinking about the path that had brought her to this moment. She remembered the early days of her relationship with Charles, when every public appearance felt like walking through a minefield. She thought about the gradual acceptance she had earned through years of dedicated service, supporting numerous charities and causes close to her heart. The Queen's wedding dress represented one chapter in the royal family's story. Camilla's dress represented another. Both were valid, both were meaningful, and both deserved recognition. The idea that displaying them together would somehow diminish the Queen's legacy seemed not only unfair but historically inaccurate. Camilla picked up her phone and dialed Charles' private number. When he answered, she could hear the warmth in his voice that still made her heart skip a beat after all these years. "Darling, I need to speak with you about something that's come up regarding the exhibition," she began. "Of course. What's happened?" As Camilla explained the situation, she could sense Charles's growing frustration on the other end of the line. He had always been protective of her, sometimes to a fault, and she knew this kind of institutional resistance to acknowledging their marriage would anger him. "This is absolutely ridiculous," Charles said when she finished. "Your dress should absolutely be included."
Our wedding was a significant moment in the monarchy's recent history, and pretending otherwise serves no one. "I agree," Camilla replied.
"I've called a meeting for this afternoon. I think it's time to address this directly." After ending the call, Camilla sat quietly for a few moments, gathering her thoughts. She had learned that in the royal world, every decision carried weight far beyond its immediate impact. This wasn't just about a dress or an exhibition. It was about respect, acknowledgement, and the ongoing evolution of the monarchy in the modern world. The late Queen had always emphasized the importance of duty and service above personal feelings. Camilla had embraced this philosophy wholeheartedly, but she also understood that sometimes duty required standing up for principles, even when it might create temporary discomfort. The boardroom at Buckingham Palace felt unusually tense as Camilla entered that afternoon, accompanied by her private secretary. The Royal Collection Trust members were already seated around the polished mahogany table, their faces carefully neutral, but their body language betraying an underlying nervousness. Sir Hugh Roberts, the former surveyor of the Queen's works of art, sat at the head of the table, his weathered hands folded neatly in front of him. Camilla took her seat with the quiet dignity she had perfected over decades of public life. She had chosen her outfit carefully that morning, a navy blue suit that commanded respect without appearing confrontational. Her jewelry was minimal but significant, the pearl earrings that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth, a subtle reminder of the continuity she represented in the royal family. "Thank you all for meeting on such short notice," Camilla began, her voice carrying the authority that came with her position. "I understand there are some concerns about the upcoming exhibition that we need to address." Sir Hugh cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. He had served the royal family for over 30 years and had navigated many delicate situations. But this particular conversation touched on sensitivities that went beyond mere curatorial decisions. "Your Majesty," he began, "we want to ensure that the exhibition honoring the late Queen's legacy is presented in the most appropriate and respectful manner possible. The wedding dress display is intended to celebrate her moment of joy and hope for the nation." Camilla nodded thoughtfully. "I completely understand and support that intention. Queen Elizabeth's wedding was indeed a moment of national celebration, and her dress deserves to be displayed with all the reverence it merits." She paused, allowing her words to settle before continuing.
"However, I'm curious about the reasoning behind excluding other royal wedding dresses from the display."
"Could you help me understand the curatorial logic behind that decision?" The question hung in the air, and Camilla could see several committee members shifting uncomfortably. Dr. Caroline Williams, a newer member of the trust, finally spoke up. "Your Majesty, there's been some concern about public reaction. The late Queen's wedding represents a simpler time, a fairy tale beginning that the public holds dear. Including other wedding dresses might complicate that narrative." Camilla felt a familiar tightness in her chest, but her expression remained composed. She had heard variations of this argument for years, the idea that her presence somehow diminished or complicated the royal story that people preferred to remember. "Dr. Williams," Camilla replied carefully, "help me understand what you mean by complicating the narrative. Are you suggesting that some royal weddings are more legitimate than others?" The directness of the question clearly caught Dr. Williams off guard. She looked around the table for support but found only carefully averted gazes. "Not exactly, Your Majesty. It's more about..." Timing and public sentiment. Camilla leaned forward slightly, her voice remaining calm, but carrying an edge that those who knew her well would recognize as a warning sign. I think we need to be very clear about what we're discussing here. Are you suggesting that my wedding to the king should be excluded from royal history? Because it might make some people uncomfortable, Sir Hugh intervened, sensing the conversation was heading into dangerous territory. Your Majesty, perhaps we could find a compromise. We could display your dress in a separate section, focusing on more recent royal history. The suggestion struck Camilla as even more insulting than outright exclusion. The idea of segregating her dress, treating it as somehow separate from the main royal narrative, felt like a deliberate attempt to minimize her place in the family's history. Sir Hugh, she said, her voice now carrying unmistakable authority, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. My marriage to King Charles was not a footnote in royal history. It was not a compromise or a consolation prize. It was a celebration of love, commitment, and the continuation of the monarchy. She stood up, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Camilla had learned over the years that sometimes physical presence was necessary to command attention and respect. The dress I wore on my wedding day was chosen with the same care and consideration as any royal bride before me. It represented not just my personal joy, but the nation's acceptance of a new chapter in the monarchy's story. To suggest that it should be hidden away or treated as less significant than other royal wedding dresses is not just insulting to me personally, it's historically dishonest. Dr. Williams attempted to interject, but Camilla continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. Furthermore, I think you're underestimating the British public. They've shown remarkable maturity and acceptance over the years. They understand that the royal family, like all families, has complex stories and multiple chapters. Treating them as if they can't handle the full truth of our history is patronizing. Margaret, who had been taking notes quietly in the corner, looked up with barely concealed admiration. She had seen Camilla handle difficult situations before, but never with quite this level of controlled power. The late Queen herself welcomed me into this family, Camilla continued. She supported my marriage to Charles and acknowledged my role as his wife and future queen consort. Are you suggesting that you know better than she did about what's appropriate for the royal family? This question hit its mark perfectly. Everyone in the room knew that challenging Queen Elizabeth's judgment, even indirectly, was not a position anyone wanted to defend. Sir Hugh realized that the meeting had taken a turn that required immediate correction. Your Majesty, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No one is questioning your place in the royal family or the legitimacy of your marriage. Then explain to me, Camilla said, settling back into her chair but maintaining her commanding presence, why my dress shouldn't be displayed alongside Queen Elizabeth's as part of the complete story of royal weddings. The silence that followed was telling. Camilla could see that several members of the committee were reconsidering their positions, perhaps realizing for the first time how their concerns sounded when stated so directly. Finally, Lady Margaret Foster, the oldest member of the committee and someone who had known the royal family for decades, spoke up. Your Majesty, I think you're absolutely right. If we're telling the story of royal weddings, we should tell the complete story. Both dresses represent important moments in the monarchy's recent history, and both deserve to be displayed with equal dignity. Camilla felt a wave of gratitude toward Lady Foster, whose support carried significant weight within the group. She had always respected the older woman's straightforward approach and historical perspective. Thank you, Lady Foster. I believe that's exactly the right approach. Camilla looked around the table, making eye contact with each member. I'm not asking for special treatment or extraordinary recognition. I'm simply asking for the same respect and acknowledgement that any other member of this family would receive. The tension in the room had shifted, but Camilla could sense that not everyone was fully convinced. She watched as Dr. Williams whispered something to the committee member beside her, their expressions suggesting continued resistance to the idea of displaying both dresses together. Camilla decided it was time to share something more personal, hoping that understanding the deeper meaning behind her wedding dress might help change their perspective. Perhaps it would help if I told you about the dress itself, she said, her voice taking on a more intimate tone. Many people don't know the thought and care that went into choosing it. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The memories of that time were still vivid, the careful planning, the awareness that every detail would be scrutinized. and the desire to honor both tradition and her own authentic style. The dress was designed by Robinson Valentine, a relatively small British company. We chose them specifically because I wanted to support British craftsmanship, just as Queen Elizabeth had done with Norman Hartnell decades earlier. It wasn't about creating the most elaborate or expensive dress possible. It was about creating something that represented who I am and what I bring to this family. Sir Hugh leaned forward, his expression showing genuine interest for the first time during the meeting. The color was particularly important to me, Camilla continued. We chose a soft gold shade, not white. This wasn't just a practical choice because I was a second-time bride. The color represented warmth, maturity, and the golden years that Charles and I hoped to share together. It was a celebration of love that had endured through difficult times. Lady Foster nodded approvingly. That shows remarkable thoughtfulness, Your Majesty. The embroidery included symbols that were meaningful to both Charles and me, Camilla explained. There were thistles for Scotland, where we had spent so many happy times together. There were also small roses, representing not just England but new beginnings and growth after difficult periods. As she spoke, Camilla could see that her words were having an impact. Even Dr. Williams seemed to be listening with more attention, perhaps beginning to understand that this wasn't just about a dress, but about a carefully considered representation of a significant moment in royal history. The coat that went over the dress was equally important, Camilla continued. It was designed to be elegant but not ostentatious. We were very aware that this was a second marriage for both Charles and me, and we wanted to strike the right tone, celebratory but respectful of the complexities that had brought us to that moment. Margaret looked up from her notes, remembering that day and how beautiful Camilla had looked. Despite all the challenges and public scrutiny leading up to the wedding, there had been a genuine joy and peace about her that had been impossible to miss. What many people don't realize, Camilla said, is that Queen Elizabeth herself was consulted about the dress design. She offered advice about protocol and tradition, but she also encouraged me to choose something that felt authentic to who I am. She understood that this dress would become part of royal history, and she wanted it to represent the best of what our marriage could bring to the monarchy. This revelation clearly surprised several committee members. Sir Hugh raised his eyebrows, and even Dr. Williams looked taken aback. The Queen was involved in the design process? Sir Hugh asked. Not in the detailed design work, of course, Camilla clarified. But she was consulted about appropriate styles and traditions. She was actually quite enthusiastic about the whole process. She told me that she wanted my wedding to be a celebration, not an apology. The weight of those words settled over the room. Queen Elizabeth's approval and encouragement of Camilla's wedding dress choice added a dimension to the discussion that none of the committee members had expected. Lady Foster spoke up again. If Her late Majesty was supportive of the dress and saw it as part of royal tradition, then surely we should respect that judgment. Dr. Williams finally spoke, her tone much more conciliatory than before. Your Majesty, I think we may have been overthinking the public reaction. If we present both dresses as part of the complete story of royal marriages, with proper context and explanation, it could actually be quite powerful. Camilla felt a sense of relief, but she knew the conversation wasn't over yet. There would still be practical details to work out, and she suspected there might be resistance from other quarters once word of this decision spread. I appreciate your willingness to reconsider, Camilla said, but I want to be clear about something else. This isn't just about my dress or my feelings. This is about how we as an institution handle complexity and change. She stood up again, but this time her posture was less confrontational and more thoughtful. The monarchy has survived for over 1,000 years because it has been able to adapt and evolve while maintaining its core values. Pretending that difficult or complicated chapters don't exist doesn't strengthen us. It makes us appear out of touch with reality. Sir Hugh nodded slowly. You're suggesting that acknowledging the full story, including the complexities, actually demonstrates the institution's strength? Exactly, Camilla replied. People respect honesty and authenticity. They understand that real life includes challenges, second chances, and new beginnings. By displaying both dresses together, we're showing that the royal family is both traditional and modern, both respectful of the past and open to the future. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone absorbed this perspective. Margaret could see that the mood had shifted significantly from when the meeting began. What had started as a defensive conversation about excluding, Camilla's dress had become a more thoughtful discussion about storytelling and institutional values. There's something else to consider, Camilla added. Many people in Britain have experienced divorce, remarriage, and blended families. By acknowledging that these experiences are part of royal life too, we're actually connecting with people's real experiences rather than maintaining an artificial distance. Dr. Williams looked around the table before speaking. Your Majesty, I think you've given us a lot to think about. Perhaps we were focused on avoiding controversy when we should have been focused on telling a complete and honest story. Controversy isn't always something to be avoided, Camilla replied gently. Sometimes it's a sign that important conversations are happening. But I don't think displaying my dress alongside Queen Elizabeth's needs to be controversial at all. I think it can be celebratory. Sir Hugh made some notes on his papers before looking up. What would you envision in terms of the actual display? How should we present both dresses to tell this story effectively? Camilla smiled, pleased that the conversation had moved from whether to include her dress to how to include it most effectively. Camilla felt a genuine spark of excitement as the conversation shifted toward creative possibilities. This was the kind of collaborative discussion she had hoped for from the beginning. I think the display should tell the story of royal weddings as moments of hope and continuity, she began, her voice becoming more animated. Queen Elizabeth's dress represents the optimism of a young nation rebuilding after war. My dress represents the possibility of new beginnings and the strength that comes from overcoming challenges. She moved toward the window, looking out at the palace gardens where so many royal celebrations had taken place over the centuries. We could arrange them chronologically, but with explanatory text that helps visitors understand the different contexts and meanings, Camilla continued. Queen Elizabeth's dress could be displayed with information about post-war Britain, the symbolism in the embroidery, and the hope it represented for the future. Lady Foster leaned forward with interest. And your dress could be presented as part of the modern monarchy's evolution, showing how the institution adapts while maintaining its essential character. Precisely, Camilla agreed. We could include information about the British designers we chose to support, the symbolic elements in the embroidery, and how the wedding represented both personal happiness and institutional continuity. Dr. Williams, who seemed to have completely changed her perspective during the meeting, added her own suggestion. We could also include some of the personal stories, the Queen's involvement in your dress selection, the way both weddings brought families together, the role these moments played in healing and moving forward. Sir Hugh was making rapid notes, clearly energized by the creative direction the conversation was taking. We could create a narrative about royal weddings as expressions of hope, resilience, and the enduring nature of love and commitment. Camilla returned to her seat, feeling that the committee was finally understanding her vision. What I find particularly meaningful is that both dresses, in their own ways, represent times when the royal family needed to demonstrate its relevance and connection to ordinary people's lives. How do you mean? Asked one of the quieter committee members, Professor David Hawkins, who specialized in royal historical narratives. Queen Elizabeth's wedding came at a time when Britain needed to believe in the future again, Camilla explained. The country had been through so much darkness and sacrifice. Her wedding dress, with its beautiful embroidery and symbols of growth and renewal, gave people something beautiful to believe in. She paused, choosing her words carefully for what came next. My wedding came at a time when the royal family needed to show that it could acknowledge mistakes, learn from them, and move forward with dignity. The dress we chose reflected that, elegant but not extravagant, traditional but not bound by the past. Professor Hawkins nodded thoughtfully. So both dresses represent moments when the monarchy demonstrated its ability to meet the emotional needs of the nation, just in different ways. Exactly, Camilla replied. And I think that's a powerful story to tell. It shows the monarchy as an institution that can provide both stability and adaptation, both tradition and progress. Margaret looked up from her notes, struck by how the conversation had evolved. What had begun as a defensive discussion about inclusion had become a thoughtful exploration of royal history and meaning. Your Majesty, Sir Hugh said, I think you've outlined an approach that could actually enhance the exhibition significantly. Instead of just displaying beautiful objects, We'd be telling a deeper story about the monarchy's role in British life. Camilla felt a wave of satisfaction, but she knew there was still one more hurdle to address. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I want to make sure we're all realistic about potential reactions. There will undoubtedly be some people who prefer the simpler narrative of just displaying Queen Elizabeth's dress. Dr. Williams surprised everyone by responding first. Your Majesty, I think you're right that some people might initially resist a more complex story. But I also think you're underestimating how ready the public is for honesty and authenticity from the royal family. The younger generation, especially, expects institutions to be transparent about their histories, added Professor Hawkins. They're less interested in fairy tales and more interested in real stories of how people overcome challenges. Lady Foster, with her decades of experience, offered a different perspective. Even among older visitors, I think there's an appreciation for stories of resilience and second chances. Many people have lived through their own difficulties and found new happiness. Camilla nodded, feeling increasingly confident about the direction they were heading. Then let's plan to move forward with displaying both dresses as equal parts of the royal wedding story. I'd like to suggest one more element, Sir Hugh said, looking up from his notes. What if we included some modern interactive elements? Perhaps audio recordings where visitors could hear about the personal significance of various design choices. That's an interesting idea, Camilla replied, though I'd want to be careful about how personal we get. Some things should remain private. Of course, Sir Hugh agreed, but perhaps some general reflections on what these moments meant to the families involved, and to the country as a whole. The meeting continued for another hour as they worked through practical details. They discussed lighting, security requirements, and the specific text that would accompany each dress. Camilla found herself genuinely enjoying the collaborative process, feeling that her input was valued, and that the final result would be something she could be proud of. As the meeting began to wind down, Dr. Williams asked one final question. Your Majesty, is there anything specific you'd like visitors to understand or feel when they see your dress displayed alongside Queen Elizabeth's? Camilla thought for a moment before responding. I'd like them to understand that both dresses represent love. Love between two people, love for family, and love for country. I'd like them to see that the royal family, like all families, has multiple chapters, and that each chapter can be meaningful and valuable in its own way. She paused, then added with a slight smile, and I'd like them to appreciate beautiful British craftsmanship and design, regardless of which dress they're looking at. The committee members laughed, and Camilla felt that the tension that had characterized the beginning of the meeting had completely dissipated. They had moved from a defensive discussion about exclusion to an excited planning session about inclusion and storytelling. I think we have the foundation for an excellent exhibition, Sir Hugh concluded. Thank you, Your Majesty, for helping us see this from a broader perspective. As the meeting adjourned, Camilla felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had stood up for herself and her place in royal history, but she had done so in a way that enhanced rather than diminished the overall story they were trying to tell. 3 weeks after the committee meeting, Camilla stood in the exhibition hall at Buckingham Palace watching the final preparations for the display. The 2 wedding dresses had been mounted on specially designed mannequins, positioned to complement each other, while allowing each dress to shine in its own right. Queen Elizabeth's dress occupied the central position, its ivory silk and intricate embroidery catching the carefully arranged lighting. The 15-foot train had been arranged to show the full scope of Norman Hartnell's design, and the delicate beadwork seemed to sparkle with its own inner light. Beside it, Camilla's gold silk dress and coat stood with equal dignity, the subtle embroidery and elegant lines creating a beautiful contrast to the more elaborate royal wedding gown of the 1940s. Margaret approached with a tablet, containing the final visitor numbers and media coverage projections. Your Majesty, the advance bookings have exceeded all expectations. We're completely sold out for the first month of the exhibition. Camilla smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. Any sense of what the public reaction has been so far? Overwhelmingly positive, Margaret replied. The press coverage has focused on the historical significance and the beautiful display design. Several fashion historians have praised the decision to show both dresses together. And any negative reactions? Margaret hesitated slightly. There have been a few critical comments on social media, but they've been far outnumbered by supportive ones. Most people seem to appreciate the honesty and completeness of the story. Camilla nodded, having expected some resistance. She had learned long ago that there would always be people who preferred simpler narratives. But she had also learned that standing up for the truth was usually worth the temporary discomfort. Charles appeared in the doorway, having come to see the final display before the official opening. His face lit up when he saw the two dresses arranged together, and Camilla could see the emotion in his eyes. "It's perfect," he said, walking over to join her. "They look beautiful together." "I think so too," Camilla replied, taking his hand. "Thank you for supporting me through this whole process." Charles squeezed her hand gently. "You shouldn't have had to fight for this in the first place. Both dresses represent important moments in our family's history." Sir Hugh approached them with a final checklist. "Your Majesties, we're ready for the media preview this afternoon. The explanatory text has been finalized, and the audio guides are working perfectly." Camilla looked at the small placard beside her dress, reading the text that had been carefully crafted over several revisions. This dress was worn by Camilla Parker Bowles at her wedding to the Prince of Wales on April 9, 2005. Designed by Robinson Valentine, the dress represents both continuity and change in royal tradition. The soft gold color and carefully chosen embroidery symbols reflect the bride's personal style, while honoring the significance of the occasion. The wedding marked a new chapter for the royal family, demonstrating the institution's ability to adapt and evolve while maintaining its essential values. "I'm happy with how that turned out," Camilla said to Sir Hugh. "It's honest without being overly detailed. The audio guide includes some additional context about the design process and the historical significance," Sir Hugh explained. "We've tried to strike the right balance between personal interest and appropriate discretion." As they walked through the rest of the exhibition, Camilla was struck by how well the wedding dress display fit into the broader story of Queen Elizabeth's reign. There were sections on state occasions, family celebrations, and moments of national significance. The wedding dresses were presented as part of the larger narrative about the monarchy's role in marking important life transitions. Professor Hawkins joined them, carrying a folder with early feedback from the exhibition preview committee. "Your Majesty, I wanted to share some initial reactions from the historians and curators who saw the preview yesterday." "Please do," Camilla replied, genuinely curious about professional opinions. Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the Victoria and Albert Museum said it was one of the most thoughtful presentations of royal fashion she'd ever seen. She particularly praised the way the display acknowledges complexity while celebrating beauty. Camilla felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Recognition from peers in the museum and historical community meant a great deal to her. Professor James Whitfield from Oxford said the exhibition demonstrates how the modern monarchy can be both respectful of tradition and honest about its evolution. Professor Hawkins continued. Charles looked pleased. "That's exactly what we hope to achieve." As the afternoon media preview began, Camilla watched from a discreet distance as journalists and photographers moved through the exhibition. She could see them spending considerable time at the wedding dress display, taking notes and photographs from multiple angles. Fashion correspondent Alexandra Chen from the BBC was interviewing Sir Hugh about the curatorial decisions behind the display. Camilla moved closer to hear the conversation. "The decision to display both dresses together was absolutely the right one," Sir Hugh was saying. "It tells a more complete and honest story about royal weddings as moments of celebration and hope, regardless of the specific circumstances." "How do you respond to critics who say this complicates the narrative around Queen Elizabeth's wedding?" Alexandra asked. Sir Hugh paused thoughtfully before answering. "I would say that good history doesn't avoid complexity. Both of these weddings were significant moments in the monarchy's recent history. Both dresses are beautiful examples of British design and craftsmanship. Both represent celebrations of love and commitment. Presenting them together actually strengthens the story we're telling about the enduring power of these institutions." Camilla felt a surge of gratitude toward Sir Hugh, who had become one of the exhibition's strongest advocates after their initial meeting. Later that evening, as the media preview concluded, Camilla and Charles walked through the exhibition one more time before the public opening the next day. The lighting had been dimmed to evening levels, creating an intimate atmosphere that highlighted the beauty of the displays. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" Charles asked as they stood before the wedding dress display. "Nervous but excited," Camilla admitted. "This felt like an important battle to fight, not just for me personally, but for the principle of telling complete stories rather than sanitized ones. "You were absolutely right to push for this," Charles replied, "and I think the result speaks for itself." They stood quietly for a moment, looking at the two dresses that represented such different but equally meaningful chapters in their lives. "Your mother would have approved," Camilla said, softly. "I think she would have been proud of how you handled the whole situation," Charles agreed. "She always valued courage and principle, even when they made things more complicated." As they prepared to leave, Margaret approached with the final details for the public opening ceremony the next morning. "Your Majesty, the Lord Mayor will be here at 10, and we expect the first visitors shortly after the ribbon cutting." "Perfect," Camilla replied. "I think we're ready." As they walked toward the exit, Camilla reflected on how much had changed since that first uncomfortable meeting with the Royal Collection Trust. What had begun as a challenge to her place in royal history had become an opportunity to demonstrate the strength that comes from embracing complexity and truth. The exhibition would open to the public the next morning, and Camilla knew that it would be judged not just on its beauty, but on its honesty and its ability to connect with visitors' own experiences of love, loss, and new beginnings. She felt confident that they had created something meaningful, a display that honored the past while acknowledging the present, and that celebrated the enduring power of hope and commitment in all their forms. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight Camilla felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had stood up for herself and her story, and in doing so had helped create something beautiful and true. The morning of the exhibition opening dawned bright and clear, with hundreds of visitors already queuing outside Buckingham Palace before the gates officially opened. Camilla stood at her bedroom window, watching the steady stream of people making their way toward the palace entrance, many of them carrying cameras and wearing their finest clothes for the occasion. Margaret knocked and entered with the morning newspapers. "Your Majesty, you'll want to see these." The coverage was extensive and largely positive. The Times had run a full-page feature about the exhibition with the headline, "Two Dresses, One Story, Royal Weddings Through the Decades." The Guardian's art critic had written a thoughtful piece about the curatorial choices, praising the decision to present both dresses as equal parts of royal history. The Telegraph's fashion editor called it a masterclass in how to honor tradition while embracing evolution, Margaret said, reading from her tablet. And the Daily Mail, surprisingly, has been quite supportive, focusing on the beautiful craftsmanship of both dresses. Camilla felt a wave of relief. While she had been prepared for criticism, the positive reception suggested that the public was indeed ready for more complex and honest storytelling about the royal family. "Any word from the palace about visitor numbers?" Camilla asked. "They've already reached capacity for today and advance bookings are still climbing," Margaret replied. "The audio guide downloads have exceeded all projections." An hour later, Camilla arrived at the palace for the official opening ceremony. The press area was bustling with journalists and photographers, and she could see the excitement in their faces as they prepared to document the day. The Lord Mayor of London arrived precisely at 10, accompanied by several dignitaries and cultural leaders. After brief speeches about the importance of preserving royal history, Camilla was invited to cut the ribbon that would officially open the exhibition to the public. "It gives me great pleasure to open this exhibition celebrating the life and legacy of Queen Elizabeth II," Camilla said to the assembled crowd. "Today we invite you to explore not just the beautiful objects on display, but the stories they tell about our shared history, our values, and our hopes for the future." As the ribbon fell away, the first visitors began to enter the exhibition space. Camilla watched anxiously as they moved through the various displays, eager to see their reactions when they reached the wedding dress section. She didn't have to wait long. A family with 2 teenage daughters stopped in front of the dress display, and Camilla could see them reading the explanatory text carefully. The mother pointed out details of the embroidery to her daughters, and they spent several minutes examining both dresses with obvious interest. "Mom, they're both beautiful," Camilla heard one of the teenagers say. "I like how they're different, but they both look really special." An elderly couple approached the display next, and Camilla watched as they studied Queen Elizabeth's dress with obvious nostalgia. "I remember watching that wedding on television," the woman said to her husband. "It was such a hopeful time after the war." Then they turned to examine Camilla's dress, and the woman's expression remained positive and interested. This one is lovely too. More modern, but still very elegant. Throughout the morning, Camilla observed similar reactions from visitors. People seemed genuinely interested in both dresses and appeared to appreciate the complete story being told. There were no signs of the controversy or negative reactions that some had feared. Sir Hugh approached her with a pleased expression. "Your Majesty, the feedback has been remarkable. Visitors are spending more time at the wedding dress display than at any other section of the exhibition." "What are they saying?" Camilla asked. "Most comments have been about how beautiful both dresses are and how interesting it is to see the evolution of royal fashion and traditions," Sir Hugh replied. Several people have specifically mentioned appreciating the honest approach to royal history. Dr. Williams, who had been monitoring visitor responses throughout the morning, joined their conversation. "I have to admit, Your Majesty, I was wrong to worry about public reaction. People seem to respond very positively to authenticity and completeness." Camilla smiled at Dr. Williams, remembering how concerned she had been during their initial meeting. "Thank you for saying that. I think it shows that we sometimes underestimate people's ability to handle complex stories." As the day continued, Camilla made several informal visits to the exhibition, mingling with visitors and listening to their conversations. She overheard a university student explaining to her friend how the display demonstrated the monarchy's ability to adapt while maintaining tradition. An older gentleman was telling his grandson about the historical context of both weddings, treating them as equally significant moments in royal history. Perhaps most meaningfully, Camilla encountered a middle-aged woman standing alone in front of the dress display. "Clearly emotional. Are you all right?" Camilla asked quietly, not immediately identifying herself. The woman looked up, startled to find herself face-to-face with the Queen Consort. "Oh, Your Majesty, I'm so sorry. I didn't expect—" "Please don't apologize," Camilla said gently. "I was just concerned that you seemed upset." "Not upset," the woman replied, wiping her eyes. "Actually, quite the opposite. I went through a difficult divorce several years ago, and I remarried last year. Seeing both of these dresses displayed together with such dignity, it means something to me. It shows that second chances can be beautiful too." Camilla felt her own eyes welling up with emotion. This was exactly the kind of connection she had hoped the exhibition might create. "I'm so happy you found meaning in it," Camilla said. "Both dresses represent love and hope, just in different circumstances." "Thank you for including your dress," the woman said. "It makes the whole story more real, more human." As the woman moved on to other parts of the exhibition, Camilla stood quietly in front of the display, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The confrontation with the royal collection, trust that had seemed so daunting just weeks earlier, had resulted in something beautiful and meaningful. Margaret appeared beside her with final statistics from the opening day. "Your Majesty, we've had record attendance and the feedback forms are overwhelmingly positive. Several visitors have specifically mentioned the wedding dress display as a highlight." "I'm so pleased," Camilla replied. "This felt like an important principle to defend." "You were absolutely right," Margaret said. "The exhibition is stronger and more meaningful because it tells the complete story." As the day wound down and the last visitors made their way through the exhibition, Camilla took one final walk through the displays. The wedding dress section remained busy even in the final hour, with people continuing to study both dresses with interest and appreciation. Charles joined her for this final tour, having spent the day at other royal engagements. "How has it been?" he asked. "Better than I dared hope," Camilla replied. "People really seem to connect with the honest approach to telling our family's story." "I'm proud of you for fighting for this," Charles said. It took courage to challenge the initial decision and vision to see how it could be improved. As they prepared to leave, Sir Hugh approached with a final update. "Your Majesty, I wanted you to know that we've already received requests from other museums about borrowing the exhibition when it finishes its run here. The response has been extraordinary." Camilla felt a deep sense of satisfaction. What had begun as a defensive battle to ensure her dress was included had become a positive example of how institutions could evolve and improve by embracing complexity and truth. The exhibition would run for 6 months, giving thousands of visitors the opportunity to see both dresses and understand the complete story of royal weddings as moments of hope, celebration, and renewal. But for Camilla, The real victory had already been achieved. She had stood up for her place in royal history, and in doing so, had helped create something more beautiful and meaningful than anyone had originally imagined. As she and Charles left the palace that evening, Camilla reflected on the lessons she had learned. Sometimes the most important battles are not about defeating opponents, but about helping everyone involved see new possibilities. The Royal Collection Trust members had not become her enemies, but her collaborators in creating something remarkable. And the public had shown once again their capacity for understanding, acceptance, and appreciation of honest storytelling. The two wedding dresses would continue to stand side by side, each beautiful in its own way, together telling a story about love, resilience, and the enduring power of hope in all its forms. It was exactly the legacy Camilla had hoped to create.